We all know that the media plays a critical role in the society. The word media is derived from the word medium, which signifies a mode or a carrier. So basically, it is a manner in which a certain institution conveys the message to the masses. And essentially, that is what the media does. The media, described as the sword arm of democracy, it acts as a watchdog to protect public interest against malpractice. It is also perceived as the fourth pillar of democracy, alongside the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature. And in the world today, the media has embraced the role of acting against injustice, acting against oppression, acting against misconduct, and against vices that are perpetrated in the society. And therefore, the lack of a free, independent media in some regions and in some countries like Russia can explain the reason why Russia has been acting with impunity from 2014 when it annexed Crimea, and in 2022 when it now invaded Ukraine and has been conducting this war to date. Remember, war is expensive. The cost of war is borne by the citizens, the taxpayers, who pay the personnel, that is the troops, and the equipment that are used in war. And above that, more importantly, the troops, their family members, their sons and daughters, their parents of the fellow citizens who are left home when they go into war zones. And when their bodies are brought back for burial, it is not something that many would accept when things are not going right. And therefore, war comes at a cost. Consequently, in democratic states, citizens would ask very, very serious questions of their government before the government commissions its soldiers to go into war. Because the cost of this war, both financially and emotionally, will be borne by the citizens. And therefore, in a well-functioning democratic state, leaders would not just send troops anyhowly into war, as has been the case in some countries, especially those that are led by authoritarian regimes. Authoritarian regimes also acknowledge the power of information and the power of the media. And one similarity, one common aspect that stands out among almost all authoritarian regimes is that they will do what it takes. They will move the heavens and the earth to control information that gets out there to the public. And this is characteristic of Russia with the current regime. They control the narrative that gets to the public, and they control the media, either directly or indirectly through parastatals and through institutions or media institutions that are close to the government. On one hand, the Russian regime argues that it follows the law. Now, let me blow your mind with this. The Russian Constitution, in Article 29, Section 5, states that the freedom of mass media shall be guaranteed. The freedom of mass media shall be guaranteed. That is the Russian Constitution. That is what it outlines. But is this followed? Do they actualize this? Do they implement it? It's a question, a very, very big question. However, Putin's regime has not lived up to the expectations of this provision of the Russian Constitution. And through the many actions that have been committed by his regime, it is evident that they have not lived up to this. The modern Russian state has been characterized by state control on information and media, and aggressive pressure on journalists who are seeking to maintain their independence. Media censorship has become a reality for the Russian media all through this time. So censorship in Russia is carried out both directly and indirectly by the state press, by the state parastatals, and also self-censorships by journalists. Since the Russian-Ukraine war began, the Russian media has been reporting differently. Actually, it has been reporting a skewed side of information that presents Russia on the positive side. Since the Ukraine-Russia war began, the nature of reporting in Russia has been different, that only portrays a positive outlook of the Kremlin and not the negative side, not the dark side, justifying all the actions of President Putin and the Russian military by whatever means. They give a justification to convince the Russians why, number one, Russia has to engage in this war and why it is important, and also not reporting on the significant dark side of this war, like the number of deaths of Russian troops, the casualty and losses that they incur. It has been determined that the Russian media does not report it correctly to its citizens. It only presents Russia in a positive limelight. And that is why for quite a very long time, you haven't seen a lot of voices in Russia coming out to condemn or to raise these concerns. There have been a few voices. Remember, at the beginning of this war, the media stations, the media channels in Russia were barred from reporting on this war. Several journalists and media persons of international media stations and foreign press were forced to leave Russia. And how did it happen? Their accreditations, their media accreditations were withdrawn, their visas were cancelled, and those who wanted to come in were denied visas, and those already in Russia could not renew their visas, and therefore the only solution is they had to leave. There was no other choice. They had to leave. And the outrageous thing is, they were accused of spreading false information. Russia accused the foreign media and foreign journalists of spreading false information. However, in true sense, the Russian media has not correctly reported on the events of this war for the last 900 days. And through the headlines, you can see it. Social media in Russia has been restricted. You can see on these headlines, the Russian media has been presenting a skewed information. It has actually been the biggest spreader of misinformation and disinformation in Russia. And I'll not be surprised if many Russians bought into the information that they are given, if many Russians fed into the information they are given, and they believed it. Undoubtedly, this war has been marred by several and serious incidences of disinformation and misinformation. For instance, the Russian state-owned television channel, Russia 1, spread false information that Zelensky, that is the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, fled Ukraine following the 10th October 2022 missile strike, that the Ukrainian president fled his country on October 10th following a missile strike. In addition, the Russian media has also attempted to promote the anti-refugee sentiments. Now remember, at the beginning of this war in 2022, a lot of Ukrainians got afraid and many left the country in fear for their lives. A majority of them being women and children, and those who could not participate in the army. A lot of them left. Many European countries opened their borders for the Ukrainians to come in. And the Russian media has attempted to downplay the manner in which these refugees are treated in those countries. At some instances also claiming that the refugees from Ukraine have been engaging in criminal activities in the countries that hosted them, among many other stories. At one point, Russia claimed that it is open to a peace deal with Ukraine. At another point, Russian President Vladimir Putin claimed that Russia gives every Ukrainian the right to make a choice concerning their future and the future of their children, which you and me know is totally not true. At another time, Russia claimed that the Ukrainian military is using chemical weapons against Russia. In this whole period of the war, not only Russia has been involved in spreading misinformation and disinformation, Ukraine too has been involved in doing the same. One critical thing is that it's been reported that both Russia and Ukraine have not been reporting the accurate and correct numbers of the losses and casualties that have resulted from this war. So the numbers are either extremely overstated or extremely understated in some instances, depending on which way it will benefit either country. Some sources have indicated that Russia only reports a third of the deaths of its soldiers. Just a third. Other sources have also indicated that at times Ukraine also does overstate civilian casualties. For instance, in incidences where it perceives that this would bring more fury to the rest of the world to put more pressure on Russia. With these sentiments, especially in Russia, it seems like most of the population does not really understand the true nature of things, the reality of things that are happening across their border. On the other hand, the few who might be understanding these things well, who might be getting the correct information, when they try to revolt, when they try to stand up against their government and oppose what the government is doing, or even try to inform the rest of Russians on what is happening through social media and through different channels they can use, the Putin regime has not been very kind to them. Most of them have been arrested. Anyone who has attempted to make any revolt concerning this war, you saw at the beginning of the war in 2022, there is some instance where a group of Russians came out to protest, and most of them were arrested arbitrarily. And since then, there has not been much. Just a few individuals, a few voices here and there speaking, but most vocal ones who are speaking against Russia are not actually in Russia. A majority of them are living outside Russia. That is where they can have the voice to speak against Putin and his regime. It is even reported that the person who recorded the video footage of the Russian convoy that had been destroyed by the Ukrainian military as it launched its incursion in the Kursk region was actually arrested. To make it more practical, in the advent of this incursion by Ukraine into Kursk region, it is reported that Russia shut down YouTube on desktop, and on other devices it slowed down. And so even in the usage of social media, the use of Telegram and other social media channels, Russians are still not freely able to share their mind, to communicate their mind, to share information regarding the occurrences in Russia because of state censorship and the fear of being arrested. And of course, because of the fear of being arrested, and of course, being tortured, and of course, as it stands right now, not many people can actually tell the objectives that the Ukrainian military intends to achieve in Russia. Even experts in war and military affairs still speculate. And one of the things that stands out, it might probably not be the main objective that the Ukrainian military intends to achieve, it might not actually be their main aim, but it's one of the things on the table. And it is to make Russians aware of the war that is going on and to make them feel what Ukrainians are feeling. And when that kind of feeling starts getting into the Russian people, as you see many fleeing the areas that have been attacked by Ukraine, many of them are being evacuated, leaving behind their houses, leaving behind things that are important to them, going to live in other areas as refugees. Now they start feeling the cost of war. And with that, they will intend to put some pressure on the government to try to ask questions. And probably this will work to the benefit of Ukraine. But is Ukraine able to withstand the pressure of this invasion? Time will tell. Of course, other people speculate that one of the objectives is that Ukraine has learned that the West will not always protect it, and Washington, D.C. is still uncertain. No one knows for sure who will come into power. Trump, on the other side, seems to be a buddy to Putin. He claims that once he gets into office, he will end this war within 24 hours. But apparently, from his sentiments, it might seem that he might not be of much support to Ukraine. On the other hand, they are not very confident of Kamala Harris' support. And therefore, probably, many speculate that Ukraine might have planned this incursion in order to have a stake or to force negotiations for whatever, for whoever comes into power in Washington, and also to force the West that whenever there's a negotiation, Ukraine will have a stake, it will have some stronghold to stand on. With all these speculations, it is still apparent that information is still being used by both Ukraine and Russia as a tool in this war. The lack of a free independent media is surely a big thing. And that is the lesson that we all have to carry. And we have to acknowledge that a free independent media plays a critical role in our society today for democracy, for freedom, for the fight for justice. Now in Russia, as civilians are evacuated, they will now start to feel the impact of the war. They will feel and actually know and understand that it is no longer fiction, as the Russian media has been putting it. It is actually real. It is happening in real time. And now, in their land, their worst fears are now confirmed. And therefore, the Russian citizens may start questioning and start demanding for answers and accountability from their government. Because for a long time, for the past 900 days, the majority of them have just been going about their businesses as usual, because they only see what is presented to them. And what is presented to them is that it is not a big deal. Russia is winning, everything is okay. But right now, with fighting, shootings raging in their places where they live, in their communities, with the bombs here and there, they now feel it. They now see the actual war. And with that, they may tend to become reactive to some extent. And when that happens, it will bring another dimension to this war. However, the objectives, the end results, and the outcome of this incursion, only time will tell. As I end, there's one very critical thing that we all have to learn and pick. And especially for me as an African, and for my fellow Africans, and for everyone, and especially to people in the US right now, this is something that is very touching. Because just like the media is behaving in Russia, the US is slowly regenerating into that kind of a situation. Even though the media in the US is not state-controlled, but the media in the US has currently been the greatest tool for sowing division. The right-wing media is radically right-wing. The left-wing media is radically left-wing. And therefore, as people consume this information, I'm going to address that in my next video, where I'll now be focusing on the US media. But before we get ahead of ourselves, what do we learn and pick from this? That it is essential that we all have to protect the freedom and the independence of the media. Because a free, independent media goes a long way to help our society, goes a long way to help in the fight for justice, goes a long way to bring information to the masses, information that will make them informed, information that will help them make the right decisions, information that will help them steer towards the right steps for the good of their countries. We all have to protect the freedom of the media. We have to protect the freedom of the media. And one of the things that we have in Africa that we have to treasure, and in countries like Kenya, where even though the media has been facing challenges, but the freedom of the media has been much improved from before, we have to protect that. We cannot go back. Let us not accept to go back to a period where media censorship by the state and the dominance and control of the media by the state, so that the state controls the narrative of what the citizens consume in terms of information. We should not go back to that era. We should not go back to that era. And it is my plea for every African, because sometimes as citizens, we are also complicit in helping the government to curtail media freedom. Because when, for instance, the party or the candidate I support is on the government side, and they come up with legislations, or they come up with policies or decrees that are intended to curtail the freedom of the media and the independence of the media, then we must stand against it. In some African countries, we have seen, as we come closer to election or during election period, they shut down the internet because they are trying to curtail the information. It is my plea to every African who is watching me right now, and not only Africans, in every other part of the world, because this thing is not as far from you as you think. We can easily, whichever country you are, even if you have the best democracy in the world today, if you don't protect it by protecting media freedom and rights, then in no time you can find yourself in a state, in a situation like it is in Russia today, where the state controls everything that you consume in terms of information. And we should not accept to go back to such a state. We fought for independence, and one of the things we were fighting for was freedom. And today, one of the biggest freedoms that we have is the freedom of the media. And I'm speaking in the case of Kenya, because some African countries actually today still have an issue when it comes to media freedom and rights. But for countries that have made such huge significant steps, like my country, Kenya, let us never accept to go back to a state of censorship, to a state of state control of information and media. Let us not accept to go there. If the media was not involved, then the issues of bad governance, corruption, would not go away. They will not go away. And therefore, we have to stand firm and protect our media. And in so doing, I also hope that people involved in the media industry also do their work diligently and ethically, as is demanded of their profession. So as I end this today, it is my plea and my call to every one of us that a free, independent media is very important to each and every one of us, and we must guard it, we must protect it. Finally, as I end my case for the need to protect our media a free, independent media, I end with a scripture from John chapter 3, verse 11. And although it is in another context, from a faith and religious basis, I end with it because of the message it conveys. It says, hold fast whatever you have, lest someone take your crown. Thanks for watching. If you found value in this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so that you never miss an update. Join our community, share your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going. Your support helps us bring you more insightful content. So don't forget to like, share, and stay tuned for more. See you in the next video.